Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Neuro Inclusion Across the Pond and Beyond podcast. Very first episode happens to be during Neurodiversity Celebration Week 2026. And I'm one of the hosts, Pasha Marlowe, here with Atif Choudhury. And we are thrilled to bring you an expansive conversation about neuroinclusion. We're going to explain to you why we started this podcast, why we think it's important, what our hopes, our intentions are in it, and why now. And it would be great to start with maybe how this came to be, how we met. Atif, do you want to tell everyone how we met and how this all began?
Um, yeah, maybe you tell it first though, because I think I'd like to hear how you hear. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Well, my recollection is it was during the first International Neurodiversity Conference,
Yeah.
which was located in Abu Dhabi. Anna, and I'm going to forget her last name, but she developed this conference, and I believe you were the keynote.
Mhm.
And I, like many others, was watching and listening to the keynote while crying and holding on to my heart, realizing that finally somebody is talking about the conversation of neurodiversity from a not just a global lens, but a very heart-centered, compassionate lens. And I resonated with it so much. And I also spoke at the conference. I spoke about neuroinclusion and mental health and well-being, because that's my lens as a therapist. And yeah, and then I reached out to you because I knew I just needed to be friends with you. And then I was thrilled to be able to collaborate with you as well.
Oh, bless you, bless you. Yeah, I'm gonna add to that is um yeah, it was a great conference and I really appreciate the sentiment and the kind words. But what got me was you sent me a text saying, which would have made sense, time zone. It was like 2 in the morning. You would I was like, my Lord, that's commitment. Do you know? I mean, I'm saying some nice things, but they're not that nice. And so to tune in from 2 in the morning, I was like, whoa, that's love. And then you sent this really lovely message. It really, really moved me. And I just felt, okay, this is good because there are a lot of things that we get to say are nice, and there's a lots of affirmations that we seek out and hopefully and with gratitude we find. But it's rare that I get something that I think, wow, this really has a sense of somebody who knows my heart really well. And I meant that. And it's clumsy when we're afraid to use language that make us make us feel vulnerable or make us feel like we're defining ourselves too quickly but I really meant it and I was like wow
Mm.
okay, and so I decided that yeah, I want to know you more, and then the speed of this got me thinking about how rare our conversations are,
Yes.
and I thought okay, well let's do a podcast. So then guess that's what we're going to do. So you as an audience watching, you're going to hear many things from a US perspective and a UK one. For sure, because it's across the pond and beyond. But the beyond bit really matters.
Very much.
It really matters because we're going to talk a lot about what our hopes are for Pasha's hopes for this and my hopes for this conversation. Where it grows, can it be a global conversation with sincerity? I absolutely believe it can. And can we really realign neurodiversity into a space, and I'm going to pause here, but into a space that recognizes its role in power in really reclaiming what we live in our hearts and hopes for the world, the way we learn things, the way we sometimes don't learn things, um, the way we struggle to fit in, how often we mask, and whether that is at times bearable. And sometimes I guess it is because we're hopefully still here. But for some people, it's not bearable and we lose them. So
Yes.
neurodiversity to me is very much about power and it is about participation. It's more of those things for me than it is about labels.
Yes.
But I live in a world with labels. I
Yes.
live in a world that seems to be increasingly obsessed with them.
Mhm.
So this is the podcast we're in, and I'm looking forward to sharing with Pasha and learning with Pasha and relearning and unlearning. So that was me for the. But back to you, Pasha.
I agree that that's where the conversation needs to go beyond labels, even though we work within systems that sometimes require labels and diagnoses. Certainly for me as a therapist throughout the years working within the pathology paradigm, I needed to work with labels and diagnoses. But I think
Mm,
the conversation, if far more importantly, needs to expand beyond that to, like you're saying, the power structures and participation. But also, if I were to think about what all this comes down to, for me, is inherent worth. And for people to recognizing no matter their functioning style, no matter who they are, where they are in the world, or what they do, or what quote unquote, contribution or value they bring to society, they're inherently worthy because they're human and
yeah.
existing. And so I often, when I remind myself of why I do this work, is to share that with people, and to reiterate it to myself and any person I talk to. So for me, that's a lot at the root of what it means to me. Because I think you and I, when we first talked, were very much wanting to expand the conversation of neurodiversity beyond the narrative that it's about different brains or different cognitive styles, which it is, but also it's a diversity of nervous systems and body minds and functioning styles. And and we embody our neurodiversity, our neurodivergence, perhaps. And so it really is far beyond our brains and how we think. It's also how we move and how we learn and how we communicate and socialize and love
Mm. Yeah, and adapt as well.
and adapt. Hmm.
Yeah, 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 brilliantly. I love it, honestly. And like I'm just a guy who's been doing this for 30 years in a. And let's explain a little bit about the UK and US models and how they compare and maybe contrast. But I look at the UK and I have seen the change when I started doing this work. It's 30 years ago, I guess, really. I would go to people's homes. This is very unusual. The American concept doesn't have this as well. So this in itself is probably worth talking about. And Pasha have not and I discussed this. But my work was to train in assistive technology for students going home to home. And I would did this for 10 years.
Mm.
For 10 years, I would travel. I mean, folks listening from America, I hope you get a sense of geography, but I would basically go from Oxford to Folkestone, which is a lot of land. It's a lot of space. Never mind London itself. And I didn't mind those jobs. I didn't mind if they were far away. It gave me thinking time on the train. And I'd go on a train and maybe travel for two and a half, maybe 3 hours to someone's home. And then I would teach them mind mapping software or or or, or voice input technology and things like this. Why am I saying this? Is because it is unusual if you can value it. It is also the best job in the world if you can value it. It's also the worst job in the world if you don't value it. Like anything, like good counseling, really.
Mhm.
Um, but I would see for a person's home who struggles to read books, what books make it to this bookshelf?
Mm.
Do you know? A person who struggles to communicate what they really want in the world. What are the cues that they've surrounded themselves around? This is very different from being in a clinician place or even in a university setting or an assessment center.
Mhm.
I'm in the most sacred place on earth. I really am.
Yes.
I'm in the one place where a person says, "Do not judge me.
Yes.
This is my home." Or in many cases, this is actually my bedroom because that's they're students.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
you're really dealing with something sacred
Yes.
and you're building up a relationship over 3 or 4 days, not consecutively, but spread out perhaps over weeks and weeks and weeks. But you're seeing that kinship and you're seeing a lot of healing. This is unusual because America doesn't have this model. So that in itself, but the UK does, is called a disabled students allowance.
Mm.
Pre-COVID and pre the online world, pre-smartphones actually, I would go to people's homes and
Yes.
I probably trained thousands of people and I can remember the feelings of every one of them in lots of ways. And I'd always think it was strange because I'm not a techie, although I do Calling All Minds, which is the company I should talk about later on at some
Hmm.
point.
Hmm.
It's very involved in technologies, but I'm not a techie. I was just very moved by what tools can help people
Mm.
and what tools can really liberate people,
Hmm.
especially those who may never get a diagnosis
Hmm.
or never feel safe in one. And
Yes.
that's what took me to the work I do now.
Mm.
that evolution of being in people's homes, it was a space where you learn not just what people tell you, but how they tell you. And you're learning for weeks and weeks in, as I said, the most naked place
Yes.
they could be in. This is
Yes.
their home. So, does that make sense?
It does. It's so interesting because as a family therapist, I used to travel to people's homes because
Okay.
it's the system that's quite important. It's not just the individual, it's the systems they live within, the relationships, the environments they live within that very much informs some of the challenges they might have.
Mm,
And then when because we're pre-computers. And so then
yeah.
computers came on the scene and all of a sudden people were, not going to people's homes anymore. We were now, especially since 2020, all
Mhm.
online. And still, when I work with people, they're in their homes typically having conversations with me, and I notice how vulnerable it is for so many to have this experience of somebody being in their home talking to them about their most vulnerable feelings and experiences and relationships. So I always see it as quite an honor to be with somebody when I'm in the presence of them in their home or even just online when I'm speaking with
Great.
somebody. Like right now, I'm in my home, so you see well, you don't see my clutter, but you see,
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
the art and books that make sense and are important to me, and I see your beautiful
Oh yeah,
background,
this is my office. I do
your
my best
office.
work. This is my day
Yes.
bed.
Oh,
It sounds
nice.
like I sleep on it all the time. And
Yes, I love
but
it.
but
I love
I
it.
know that when I'm a bit um I do a lot of walking barefoot, particularly in the mornings with my dog.
Nice.
And it's took me time. I really recommend it for everybody, and I always think I should do a little blog on it, but it's a process. The process is you're very self-conscious, and the process is you're feeling really self-judgmental, and then you see strangers and you think they're judging you, and you go for all
Mm,
of that. But then eventually they start to drift away, and
yes.
then you just realize actually none of them matter, and then you do it again and again, and eventually you don't even see them anymore. Do you know?
Nice.
Nice. But the
Nice.
biggest advice I can give is to leave your phone at home. Do you know?
Mm, that is
Uh,
good advice. It is good
yeah.
advice. It's
And so,
interesting because what you're speaking to partially is the other people's judgments and other people's opinions
yes.
of us. And I
Yeah.
think when we talk about neurodiversity and neuroinclusion, a lot of it is breaking down the stigma, the bias, the judgments, and the expectations we have of other people that are all quite subjective
Mhm.
and so I think one of the reasons why I'm really glad we're having this conversation is to help people learn and unlearn what they've been taught about what is professional or what is appropriate
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
in the workplace and beyond. I know that this conversation is not just going to be about the workplace, but I do know also people are probably listening about neuroinclusion in the workplace. And I think what works in the workplace also works elsewhere.
Mm.
In the work that you did working with people in the home, that can translate to working with people in the workplace. Similarly, for me working with families, relationships in the families are similar to relationships at work. So I love that the conversation will integrate our lived experiences, but also different systems,
Yeah. Yeah.
workplace,
Yeah.
community, beyond.
No, actually, I want to add to that. Something that is important is, again, this is slightly different because I think the US, you have more public holidays, but you have less holidays, way less. I mean, you have the least holidays in the world, I think, right? I mean, and even when I noticed that my family, a lot of my family are American, so I just should say that as well. And I think it's really different how they look at their freedom in the
Mm,
workplace. You know? And that
mm,
freedom is a really big word to use in an American context as well. But I just want to park something. In truth, we spend more time with our workers, our colleagues, our jobs than we do with our family.
mhm,
We spend more time in that place than we do with our loved ones or our hobbies.
mhm.
And of course, we try to separate them as best we can. But work is deeply personal if you're
Yes,
lucky. If you're lucky, it's deeply personal
yes.
um, because it's an exercise of your values,
Mhm,
that you choose to do. My challenge is that when we think about hidden differences or labels or barriers or neurodiversity, sometimes we separate them from the work because, and my question is, oh, is it because we're masking at work,
Mm,
or is it because we're not used to thinking of it outside of work?
mhm,
Because largely we're only now just thinking about it in work at all.
mhm,
Do you know?
mhm,
So I guess those who are listening, especially if you're from a HR point of view or human resources point of view, or
mhm.
I would really love us all as we go through the future podcasts of this, that we come into this space not just as colleagues or workers or people really intrigued on the conversation, but we also go in this space because we're somebody's aunt or uncle,
Yes.
that we're maybe somebody's mother or father. But we are thinking about this as our civic and social responsibility.
Yes.
And can we understand that beyond labels? That's a question, I guess, for,
Hmm.
maybe rhetorically, but for both of us and the audience.
Hmm.
Do you think,
Yes.
Pasha, we can get to a place of our labels?
I do. I do. I very much believe that labels aside, we're talking about differences, different ways to function.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be more challenging in the workplace because there's societal rules and structures and norms and expectations that I think we're starting to challenge. And I believe people do mask more in the workplace. There's a lot at stake, financially speaking, socially, uh, and it's not safe to unmask at work
yeah,
depending on where you are and who you work with.
yeah,
I also talk to people who are not able to unmask at home. So it's a
yeah,
constant
yeah.
exhaustion of not feeling safe in their own body or in their own space. But I do believe we're going to be able to work beyond labels as we continue to challenge the pathology paradigm, to lean into the neurodiversity paradigm, to recognize how much these rules of norms that we live under are subjective, and a lot of them based in ableism, racism, white supremacy, colonialism, capitalism. That'll be a whole other podcast episode. Like where did these norms come from? But I think people are starting to challenge them. And I think younger generations are feeling very much in their nervous system not aligned with neuronormativity and normative standards. And the more people feel misaligned, the more they'll identify as neurodivergent or different or disabled or whoever, whatever their identity is. I think we'll see that more and more. I think we'll see it growing, and more people will be rejecting these
Great.
standards.
I love this. This is such a, there's so much off the springboard of that as well. I'm just gonna hold a space. So those again, it's exciting, right? This is the very first podcast, and you think just if you think about, I know my mind's already gone there of just the last 2 minutes of what Pasha said. There's a whole series, just a really great series about participation, about labels, about whether we can build in universal design and universal design learning. Can we build an anticipatory welcome to a generation of people that are just expecting it? And what happens when they don't get it, you know?
Mhm.
And and we're gonna touch on in this podcast for a little bit on on the question about can we get there in the current climate that we're in?
Mhm.
Because yes, I would say very true, not just to my hopes and aspirations, but also I suppose to my life's work that I believe we can get there. But we're watching some really powerful forces in the
Yes.
world
Yes.
that are playing with identity politics to a certain extent, which is causing a lot of pain in people's hearts.
Mhm.
It's something that I am, just for the audience, I'm 52 years old, and we am watching identity politics in a way that perhaps hasn't been around for a long time. But is it because it's new? A question. Or is it because it's been suppressed? A question, you know? Or
Mhm.
is it because people are using information in a way that we've never used before and
Yeah.
finding a sense of identity and perhaps tribalism
Mm.
and even a space to put that pain?
Mm.
And if so, okay. But are we reinforcing pain by doing it? Or are we birthing something really great through this process? Yes, it's messy, but are we birthing something that we need? It's not something that we can easily answer, but we can discuss it. Yeah? Um,
Absolutely.
but Pasha, I want to ask you just for the audience as well. You use the word paradigm, and particularly in pathology paradigm.
Mhm.
Just for those who may not have heard that before, what does that mean for you?
So the pathology paradigm basically says anyone who is different from society's idea of what is normal, quote unquote ideal, is disordered. These are all terms I don't love. Disordered, deficient, um, broken, a problem to be fixed. Whereas the neurodiversity paradigm states there is no normal. And rather than wanting individuals to change and adapt to fit into societal norms, rather, how can we fix society and change some of these systems and structures to accommodate all functioning styles? So it is a big shift,
Hmm.
paradigm shift, uh, that is challenging because so many systems within the pathology paradigm, such as therapists, psychiatrists, doctors, still do diagnose people with something that ends in disorder, because they're different from the standards and norms. One of the reasons why I stepped away from any diagnoses myself or diagnostic tools myself, but we still do work in that system that does help people get services and medication and insurance. And so we're in this messy middle where we're still in the pathology paradigm, shifting to the neurodiversity paradigm. But it feels quite dangerous and sometimes taboo to introduce this new paradigm to people who are in those systems. But I do believe that we're in a place where we are shifting the paradigm and are challenging those old structures because it's not working. It's not working in the workplace. It's not working in the home place. It's not working in communities. We're becoming less and less well, as a whole. And so I think there is a shift that's happening.
Yeah. I just one of those listening. So Pasha's written an amazing book on this. Yeah. And I really, really, she's being really modest, but you guys should get it. It's about creating cultures of neuroinclusion. And I hope you all get a chance to look at that and buy it. I want to ask you this then. So in the UK, and this is really going back to the heart of this conversation, what is across the pond? We in the UK, they often use the medical model, you know.
Hmm.
So this the medical model says what's wrong with you, you
Yes.
know, um, and maybe what you're dealing with at times. But as a social model, and especially a biosocial model, because
Hmm.
there is biological implications, pain management. When you're in pain, you can't really say "love me, love my pain," you know. But what you
Hmm.
can say is understand my reality,
Hmm.
understand my barriers,
Hmm.
understand these barriers,
Hmm.
you know. And so a biosocial model isn't dealing with what's right or wrong with you, but rather what barriers you are facing.
Yes.
And who collectively is responsible for that? Well, that's the civil society you're in. It's the
Hmm.
people that make legislations and laws. It's the people that can be part of policy power and change. So when I started this work back in even the times when I'd go to people's homes, I have a diagnosis of a specific learning difficulty.
Hmm.
And I think about a couple of things, and I'm going to bring us very relevantly to something that happened in America yesterday.
Hmm.
Um, but in my pain as a child and certainly as a teenager, to get a diagnosis with what we call an SPLD, and I don't think you call it SPLD in the US state, right?
What does
So
that stand for?
yeah, it's great. So SPLD is specific learning difficulty rather than global learning difficulty.
Okay.
So a specific learning was what we'd call a spiky profile in the UK. So
Hmm.
you have this good sort of, and this is medical model language, right? So
Hmm.
when I do in this podcast move towards medical model language, or if Pasha moves to pathology language, we'll probably say it. So
Yes.
it's clear. So because it speaks to what we are trying to build upon and to make it better.
Yes.
But there's something about where we might go with this work, which I suspect it will, which if we don't, then a generation after us definitely will,
Hmm.
which might not work with a broken model to make it better.
Yes.
It may just reject the model altogether.
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
And there's that, folks, it's worth hanging on to this podcast just to see that if we get to that bit.
Yes.
All right. So if I think about that, then I'm from a community that is already dealing with lots of stuff,
Mhm.
be it for race, for migration, for trauma, from shame.
Mhm.
So it's not in my interest to get a piece of paper that says I've got a specific learning difficulty.
Mhm.
You can do many things, but that is not one you want to have.
Mhm.
It's just not. So when you look at people and say, do you really want to queue up for that piece of paper?
Mhm.
No. What
Mhm.
do you want then? I want to be welcomed.
Mhm.
Okay. What does that mean? Well, in some ways you can say, I don't even know yet,
Mhm.
but I know it's not this.
Mhm.
No, if people can just sit with that and go, okay, it's all right, you don't know.
Mhm.
We're going to find out. But
Mhm.
we're not going to find out at all if you're not safe.
Mhm.
And so language really matters here.
Yes.
So the UK moves, and it still uses SPLD.
Mhm.
A spiky profile is when somebody has a very high skill set. So even on a dyslexia scoring, which is really lovely for me to read, but it's my verbal reasoning is in the top 2% of the country.
Mhm.
If you ask me to even organize a meeting without double clashing it or things, that's going to happen. I'm going
Mhm.
to just administration spelling is not a thing that I do, right?
Mhm.
And so I've set up a company with friends in Palestine, and I navigated getting doctors across the Gaza Strip.
Mhm.
But I certainly did it plenty of times, send my daughter to school without her packed lunchbox when she was really small.
Yes.
So these are things.
Yes.
But essentially, these are just human things. When
Yes.
we come to a spiky profile, what we have is something that is really, really high in one person, in the same person, and
Mhm.
very low in the other person. So there's a big spike.
Yes.
Okay. Now, that language can change because we can move away from deficit language
Mhm. Mhm.
and we're moving more into neurodiversity, which is true.
Mhm.
And we're using less and less in the UK of SPLD, but it's there.
Mhm. Mhm.
In truth, folks listening, you have to show how broken you are in
Mhm.
order to get support,
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
order to feel welcomed.
Yeah.
This is a model that cannot work.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the US, I'm curious, but I feel you got more of a deficit disorder model. This is controversial, but we're going to really get to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
I think that the US has more of a deficit
Mhm.
disorder narrative than the UK does even now.
Yes, to get services, one would need to almost prove their struggle, their suffering, their disability through an assessment or a diagnosis, which, as we know, intersects with privilege, just the opportunity, the money, the wait time to get a diagnosis or be safe disclosing. For some people, the assessment offers services. For some, it offers validation of experience, and for some, it connects them to resources. But in my country right now, unfortunately, an assessment, for example, of autism is dangerous for some. And or I know you want to talk about what Trump says, so I'll let you do that in a moment. But I will say that the narrative is that if you do not have documentation or paperwork or proof of a disability, then you're less likely to get accommodations. And part of the work that I do is first of all the privilege wrapped up in getting a diagnosis or disclosing, but also and early access to care and all of that. Also, why do we need to prove anything to have our needs met? In
Hmm.
school, in the workplace, why
Yeah.
cannot the conversation be about needs and preferences on a human level, a reciprocal conversation, not this conversation of from a status of power and hierarchy? Yeah, that's the direction I would love to go.
Yes, yeah, well, that's the direction we're going to go. So,
Yes.
okay. So in the UK, I'll just we're coming to the end of this very first one, but I want to say in the UK, if I was taking away a strong contrast, we have the Equalities Act here, and the Equalities Act is about barriers. It is actually an act we used to have in 1995 what was called the DDA, the Disability Discrimination Act. So if you have, going back to the medical model or pathology model, if you have a disability,
Hmm.
protected one, then it is legal to discriminate in particular ways. But you have to prove you have that
Yes.
disability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Same with ADA here. Hmm.
Yeah, it is very much so. Now, in the UK, we've moved away from that model into a biosocial model in legislation. Yes, it's not perfect because most companies in this country still act as if it's the DDA that governs them,
Right.
or in your case, the ADA.
Yeah.
But it's actually, we have the Equalities Act.
Mm.
And the Equalities Act does two things that are very important for those listening. One is it requires leaders and organizations to anticipate.
Mm.
It's really enshrined in the Equalities Act to anticipate and have anticipated duties. That doesn't mean leaders should be psychic, but they can anticipate there'll be real reasons why people won't tell them things.
Yes.
Second is it's not that you're not allowed to ask. That's not the issue. The issue is you don't have to prove it.
Yes. 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 Hmm.
This is really important. It's deeply liberating. You don't have to prove it. In the US, you do. You still have to prove a pathology model, a deficit model, as best I understand it.
Hmm. Yeah. Mostly that's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
this is,
And the
well,
anticipatory aspect, like with inclusive design or universal design
yeah,
too, anticipating needs, being more proactive
yeah,
rather than somebody asking for a transcript, for example, offer that rather than somebody asking for
dead right.
different sensory experiences at work, offer variety or choice or freedom,
Yes, absolutely.
autonomy. Yeah.
What we go into later on as we share more of the work that we're doing here. Calling All Minds, which is my organization, we have built a passport, an inclusion passport, which
Yeah.
allows people to share their barriers. They don't even have to share the name of something. If
Hmm.
they say, look, I like to have information in advance of meetings, that's great. They don't have to say because I'm autistic. It just doesn't.
Yes.
If someone says I use a screen reader, it does not matter why. Do you know? If they
Yes.
want to say it, then great. But the culture has to be that the organization does the anticipatory duties rather than the individual doing the emotional labor.
Yes. I love your passport program. And much like your passport program, I have a respect framework. And the respect framework is basically a reciprocal conversation between leadership and teams, which is something like how do you prefer to receive feedback? What are your
Yeah,
preferences around communication? What are your support needs? No diagnosis or labeling or disclosure necessary to talk
yeah,
about needs and preferences.
yeah.
So it's similar.
Brilliant. Look, this speaks to heart, and we're going to do more of this. We're coming to the end, but I want to plant a seed. There are two seeds I may plant with with the audience and with Pasha.
Are you going to tell him what Trump said? Because I kind of queued that up that you were going to tell.
Yes, yeah. Well, okay, yeah, you did. I mean, Trump. Okay, let's. I mean, you're in Maine. You are in.
I'm in
But
Maine,
for
farther
what,
away.
for good or bad, he is
It's embarrassing.
not just the leader of the US world. I guess he's the most powerful leader in the world. Do you know?
Hard to imagine.
Yeah, for hard to believe, right?
Mhm.
But we are here. And I always think, and we're thinking about across the pond, and I always jokingly said that when the US catches a cold, the UK sneezes, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
and with that, I mean, and this is why we're called across the pond and beyond, because
Yes.
we aren't going to do politics here, folks. It's going to be how neurodiversity shows up in our lives, the barriers that we face, but how it changes the way we feel about ourselves.
Yes.
And yesterday,
Yes.
regardless of whether it's celebration week or not, it's just powerful that it happened yesterday. It's powerful that Pasha and I planned this conversation across the pond and beyond. But yesterday, Donald Trump referred to Gavin Newsom as not being intelligent because he has dyslexia. He said, call it what you want, but I don't want a president with learning difficulties or learning disabilities. Now, there's lots we can say about what dyslexia is or isn't, but what Trump has done is shame dyslexia, people with dyslexia, impacted by dyslexia, parents of children with dyslexia. And at the same time, we can all possibly agree that Trump is not much of an intellectual in many ways. And even when he's trying to denounce Gavin Newsom, he refers to him as the President of America, which has its own comedy element of
Hmm.
here is the President of America referring to somebody else as the President of America while he's trying to make
Hmm.
fun of them.
Hmm.
Um, you guys can watch that, and we'll probably add this to the recording if we can.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I wanted to ask Pasha, do you feel this has consequences,
Hmm.
and in what way?
Yes, beyond dyslexia, talking about people with learning differences not being able to be leaders is false. Talking about people with learning differences as lesser than, less intelligent, less valuable, less worthy to society is false and so very dangerous. And I think anyone watching that or hearing that clip of Trump saying that the governor of California should never be president because he has dyslexia, not only hypocritical in all the ways you alluded to, but anybody can look at that and then internalize their own differences or their own disabilities. And I might add that in the history of America, Biden had a stutter, Lincoln had depression, ADHD, James Madison, epilepsy, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Woodrow Wilson, JFK, all ADHD and dyslexic, and good or bad president, effective or not effective president or not,
Mhm.
most leaders that I talk to in globally, like in who lead organizations, have some form of lived
Oh, yeah,
experience with
yeah,
neurodivergence or disability or divergence from quote
yeah,
unquote norms, which is why they are where they are in leadership because they think beyond norms. They're more expansive in their thinking. So
yeah,
I think it was a very unfortunate, obviously inaccurate, but discriminatory and despicable comment that he made, and he's holding on to whatever power he has with a thread by tearing other people down. That's
yeah.
how he stays feeling empowered by
Yes.
disempowering other people.
Well, and
It's
we know this is the greatest act of cowardice,
yes,
and and
yes.
so okay, so we're going to wrap up here. But this is something. I mean, I'm thinking about Eisenhower as well. He was a wheelchair user, I think, right? If from my memory. So one thing is we can look at great leadership, and I'm not sure I look at any American president in that way particularly, but I am really at pains to say that people are this great in this world, and we owe a debt to differences and people's realities, not despite these things, but because of them.
Yes.
Because the way they think differently, the way they feel differently, the way they see things differently, we have not done historically anything close to justice on women and women's differences and how they show up in the world and how they reach power or prevented from it.
Mm.
In truth, I'm going to close from my side and want to invite Pasha to close after me. But I want to say one thing is that we are all neurodiverse. It'd be a pity if we weren't, but we are. That's the beautiful thing. We are all neurodiverse, but we're not all marginalized because of it.
Mhm.
And that's the work to do. How do we address that for those who are? This is a conversation about power. It's a conversation, as Pasha's just said about Trump, about attitudes.
Mhm.
And it's also a conversation about collective healing.
Mhm.
That can we be a civil society that can collectively choose to unmask, not just for those with labels or diagnostics, but rather those who just need to feel safe. We're going to be talking about this for about 6 sessions and then see maybe there's an appetite to do more. But I'm looking forward to this. I'm really excited to have this time with Pasha and to share and contrast these stories. But over to you, and thank you from my side of listening and the space that we're creating here. Pasha, for you to close, if you will.
Thank you. I'm just learning right here and now that it was 6 sessions. I'm
Yes,
picturing 600. We have
yes,
so much to talk about.
yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I'm just delighted to be doing this with you, not only because you are across the pond, we could have a more, global conversation. But I believe these conversations are going to come back to humanity and heart and inherent worth and compassion. And I think those kind of conversations will sustain the neurodiversity movement and make neuroinclusion a possibility. I'm excited to continue to talk about power and position. In fact, even just neuroinclusion itself as a word or as a practice requires somebody in power to be the one who's including. So it's almost as if neuroinclusion, the goal of neuroinclusion is to not need neuroinclusion. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, get
So,
it. Yeah,
that we would all just be.
Yeah. Yeah.
because we
Yeah.
are, not need to be included because we're already there. So I'm so excited to continue these conversations, and I'm grateful for whoever's out there listening. And we will welcome any feedback. We'd love to know if you have thoughts as to where you would like these conversations to go. And what you would want to learn and unlearn, and then hopefully we'll bring guests on
Yes.
as we
Yeah. Yeah.
progress from
Yeah.
around the world
Yeah. Yeah.
to expand these conversations further. So I'm
Brilliant.
excited about this.
Me too. Me too. We're all just walking each other home, as they say.
Yes,
Um, Brilliant, Pasha. Thank you so much. And thank you for having this session, this time with me. It's a real joy in my life. And yeah, 6 sessions and maybe beyond. I mean, definitely I would love 6 sessions just with you, but we can get guests and get some rolling on there. And brilliant. Let's do that. Yeah.
absolutely. Okay, I'm going to push stop, but you stay on.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.